Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by OnlineGreatBooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas. I'm Scott Hambrick.
I'm Karl Shute.
And today on the Online Great Books podcast, we're going to talk about Jordan B. Peterson's new book, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life. If 12 wasn't enough, you're in luck. He has 12 more.
I heard a rumor that you didn't like this one.
No, it's sorry. And I'm going to get a lot of hatred for that, and that's fine. You can't hate me more than I do, so it'll be fine.
Well, that doesn't sound very healthy.
No, I'm hard on myself, maybe.
I'm going to play Jordan Peterson here and say, it's important to be, I can't do his voice, clean your room. It's important to be appropriately grateful.
Yeah, I don't hate myself, but I am hard on myself, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hatred for panning this book without having read every word of it, but I have a friend who's a plumber, and he says that he talks about the plumber's rule, or the plumber's law. And it goes like this. If it smells like poop, looks like poop, feels like poop, I don't have to taste it to know it's poop. I applied Ray the plumber's rule to this, and I didn't finish it. Yeah. But you need to go to onlinegreatbooks.com/podcast and check out what we're doing over there. Please go and join our mailing list, or even join our main program while enrollment is open. About once a month, so you get on that list, and we'll be kicking the doors open and letting you in soon. You've got to do that, because if you don't, we're going to have to get a sponsor like Sherry's Berries.
Uh-huh.
Or we might have to say some lame shit about like stamps.com, or I might have to like white label some beard balm or something like that to like pay the bills and keep the lights on around here. So go and support the show by doing that. And if you don't want to join the program, send one of these shows to one of your weird friends. Please. Please, please, please.
And if you don't have any weird friends, what's the matter with you?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that we can't be friends either, but maybe I can be your weird friend. It's really hard to grow a podcast these days.
Yeah.
There are weird things going on with search engines, I think. And then more than that, though, there are thousands of new podcasts every single day.
Let me tell you a story, dear listener and dear Scott. I was pulling up my corporate music dispenser, which rhymes with Glamazon, and yesterday at the gym, and like the top 3 lines, it comes in rows. The top 3 lines were podcasts.
Yeah. That
they were pushing. So OC Swingers, Disgraceland, Ashtray, The Daily, Spy Fair, Michelle Obama's Thing, 10% Happier with Dan Harris. That sounds dreadful. They're pushing all sorts of things. And if I scroll to the right, I see This American Life. I see Encyclopedia Womanica. Sounds wonderful. The ESPN Daily podcast. I do not see anything like the Online Great Books podcast.
No, I'm not going to. I know we're kind of a weird niche, and Amazon's not going to get ahead by promoting our weird little show over, whatever consumer dreck they're going to promote. But even outside of that, there's like 2,000 new podcasts a day, and we're all trying to get in your ear hole a little bit, and makes it tough. So send the show to somebody else, or I'm going to have to start promoting Alpha Brain, something like that.
What's Alpha Brain?
That's that stuff that Joe Rogan peddles. I don't know exactly what it does.
Does Martha White still sell flour?
Yeah.
Martha White.
Yeah, that would be good.
That's the best flour for you. Everything a biscuit should be.
That's true.
That's Martha White.
The platonic ideal of biscuitness. Karl read all of this book. I did not.
Well, no, in fairness, the last 40% of it, the last 20% of it's footnotes. So the last other 20% of it I did with Word Runner, which just pops the words at you in a hurry. You don't have to move your eyes. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I think I've figured it out. I think I have 2 theories here for you. Not everything in this is terrible. Most of it's decent. Decent rules of life. No, I have 3 theories for you. Decent rules of life. Okay, so he's the judge from Kierkegaard's Either Or, who has all sorts of decent rules of life. He is Polonius from Hamlet. To thine own self be true. I think it'd be hilarious if you had Polonius played by a Jordan Peterson imitator.
Ugh.
With his Kermit the Frog voice. His voice is instantly recognizable. It's entertaining. Or, get this. All right, so I was thinking of it in terms of Dungeons and Dragons. Okay.
Oh, God.
I'm just trying this out. So, in Dungeons and Dragons, one of the cool things about it that makes it better is your character is supposed to have an alignment.
Mm-hmm. And
your character is supposed to live according to that alignment. So you have lawful good, chaotic good. All the losers think they're chaotic good. I have thoughts about that. So either lawful or chaotic, or good or evil, or neutral.
And he's chaotic neutral.
No, he's not chaotic neutral. He's lawful neutral.
Huh. Interesting.
In other words, order is the only... For me, that's the big problem. There's all these rules. Why ought you to order yourself by these rules? Well, because it's better. Why is it better? Don't look behind the curtain. It just is.
Yeah.
Can I tell you my theory of alignments?
Yes.
Everything that's not lawful is evil.
I agree with that.
So chaotic good, sorry, you're evil. Chaotic evil, you're evil. Lawful evil, you're better than chaotic good, because at least I can make a deal with you. And you'd live up to it. I better read everything in that deal.
Right.
But chaotic good, you never know what he's going to do. Those elves in the forest, they're going to decide, well, today I'm chaotic, so screw you.
Libertarians, lawful evil. They'll stick to a contract, but best read it twice.
Yeah, well, if you're going to stick to it, yeah, lawful evil, you better read it.
I didn't hate this book, Carl, but I kind of expect, I don't know, I've lived over half of my days, and I didn't hate it, but I don't have enough days left to read this kind of stuff, so I didn't. The Infinity Stack is looming large, man. It's teetering and it's threatening to avalanche and kill me at any moment. And if I do a quick inspectional reading, like Adler exhorts us to do in his book, How to Read a Book, you'll find that you'll do an inspectional reading on 10 or 15 or 20 times as many books as that you actually do an analytical or close reading of. And this one was worth an inspectional read, but nothing else in my short days.
Mm-hmm.
If I was going to live to be, I think the over-under would be about 400 years old, then I might pick this one up. And then I've also got a mindset right now that I'm struggling with some of these kinds of guys. And we can talk about that some more here in a little bit. Caveat, I have met this man. I have shaken hands with him. I have sat in a chair and talked to him. He was on episode number 5 of this show. He is a kindly man. I think he has the best of possible intentions. His intellect is above average, and his verbal acuity is enormously above average. He's a pretty good guy to sit down and have a cup of coffee with. If he was your daughter's father-in-law, you probably wouldn't be super mad about that. There's a lot to recommend him. But the front of this book says that it's a quote from the New York Times, the most influential public intellectual in the Western world right now.
Yeah.
What?
Yes, a lot of the discomfort with, his middle name's Burnt. I just saw that. With Jordan Burnt Peterson. It's like Burnt Norton. The T.S. Eliot poem. He is portrayed as an intellectual, which I suppose he is. He's a public intellectual. He seems to be kind of shocked by that, at least in the writing.
Me too.
Imagine if somebody latched onto our show and suddenly we're doing, lecture shows sold out around the world, and millions of people are coming up and saying, we're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Well, what do you do about that? He is sometimes considered to be a right-wing intellectual, and that's where, if you care about such things, that's where I think is a problem, because he's not particularly right-wing.
He's a progressive.
Yes.
He's not even a conservative.
The Overton window's moved so far. He's a liberal college professor, and he seems like a right-winger.
Well, to lunatics.
He's like an old-fashioned liberal. He's like Daniel Patrick Moynihan and him would have been about the same, I think. old-time liberal.
Yeah.
That looks on the far right now.
I think he's controlled opposition. The New York Times gives him a blurb that says the most influential public intellectual in the Western world right now. Well, come on. I don't think he knows that he's controlled opposition. I don't think that he knows the New York Times and their ilk have anointed him to take on this role so they can control the Overton window. Because if they had an actual right-wing intellectual in the New York Times bestseller list, they may not be able to control the conversation like they can if it's, frankly, a progressive, a mid-century
The actual
progressive.
right-wing intellectuals are not on the stage anymore.
No. Yeah, where's Zizek?
Can't find him.
Yeah.
So he's as right-wing as you can get, I suppose. But, he's like 1960s Democrat. He's Canadian, so it doesn't count. But where I see that is he has all sorts of rules, but if you scratch beneath the rules, this is why I called him Polonius. Polonius is full of advice.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds good, and everybody likes to quote it. It's not that great. To thine own self be true. Let me find that line. What does that mean, to thine own self be true?
A radical individualism. Let's try to go through the thing in some sort of linear way. Mm-hmm. First of all, my wife picked it up, and she says, "Oh, JBP, I'll check it out." So she picked it up, and she started reading Overture or the whatever, where he just talks about his illness or whatever, this drug addiction. He went in some crazy medical-induced coma to get over drugs in Russia, and he writes 20 pages about that. Goodness gracious.
Yeah. I found the Polonius speech, and it sounds exactly like Peterson to me. So I'm gonna read a little bit of this. And if you're a Jordan Peterson fan, that's fine. My first encounter with hearing about him, I heard about the pronoun thing. It's like, I thought good for him. But then there were young men coming in to the gym that would be reading books, like Dostoevsky or something, because they had heard Jordan Peterson. So there's that. That's good. That's
sure.
good. But the advice, the rules, So Polonius says, there my blessing with thee in these few precepts in thy memory. Look thou character, give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast in their adoption tried, grapple them unto thy soul with hoops of steel, but do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new-hatched unfledged comrade. Beware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in, bear that the opposed may beware of thee. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. And it goes on, and it ends with, to thy own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. Farewell, my blessing season. This is this in thee. He gives do this, do that, do this, do that. Be every man's friend, but not really. Right. Buy nice clothes, but not too nice. So Polonius's advice is, I suppose it's good, but it's shallow.
He who hesitates is lost, but only fools rush in.
Okay, so what do I do right now? Do I buy the thing that I need to buy, or do I not? It's too general. So the very beginning, the first rule in this book is, do not carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievement.
Sounds good.
Carelessly. That's my note.
Yep.
Great. So if I'm not careless, I can do it, It's a rule that I suppose is true. I shouldn't carelessly do anything. Do not carelessly order your dinner.
I did read this chapter. He tells a story about how his granddaughter is learning, and then he tells some story about the Bible from Luke, and then he goes, it's just this meandering thing, and he just doesn't make a point, really. And then the last line of each chapter is the tag, right? So the last line of this chapter is, do not carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievement. So I agree with that tag, but he didn't even make the most basic arguments for the efficacy or usefulness of social institutions, or how they're created, or what purposes they may perform. He doesn't mention Burke. What is he doing? What is it? I know what he's doing. He hammered the check on this. That's what he did. He pounded the book out and he hammered the check, because it's not terribly thoughtful. I'm sorry. It's just not. Just because he pushed back on people who are trying to tell him what pronouns to use doesn't mean that this is a great book, or even actually that he's an ally. So Hambrick's chapter on not denigrating social institutions would have said a lot about how social institutions, once they have become ingrained in society, typically have solved the problem that they were created to address in the first place. And then the people who see that social institution have no awareness of why it came about in the beginning. They chafe against it, rail against it, destroy that social institution, only then to find out how the emergent system that the social institution was had been protecting them from, I don't know, venereal disease, the destruction of the family, who knows, right? 1,000 things.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, he doesn't make any of the Burkean arguments, which I think have to be made. Social institutions are there. They hold society together. There's something that we understand about each other in the fact that we know the social institutions, and that if we destroy them, we don't know what will follow.
Yeah, I want to go to, let's see, what page is this? Kindle does not give me pages.
So if he's a conservative, you keep looking.
Sorry.
If he's a conservative, he would approach particularly this question about social institutions from a conservative, or if he's not a conservatives aren't right-wing, by the way, or if he's a right-wing person, he would approach this question from the right, and he would be able to demonstrate why social institutions often perform a salutary function for the people, and what the dangers are if you toss them out. And he doesn't even get close to that. He doesn't even swing and miss.
Yeah. So he says, I think I agree with that, even though there's, genuine, not terrible advice in this book. I agree with that.
I agree too, Karl.
In the bottom-up section of Rule 1, because I can't get page numbers because Kindle hates me. How should you act is just the short-term immediate version of the fundamental long-term question, how should you survive?
No,
absolutely not. He will talk about the ideologies of left and right as being necessary, as balancing. You need the liberal kind, he calls them the liberal, in order to see the new ideas, and you need the conservative kind to rein in the liberal. But they're both playing on a field that's, to my reading, undefined, which is not how should you survive, but how ought we to live? And if you have an answer to that question, then your rules aren't just Polonius BS. They're, you should do this because it fits your final end.
Right. And I've read books for this show that I don't agree with from people who I think are awful people, like Marcuse, Alinsky, but their books hang together at least, to push their end. And his doesn't do that. So let's go back. You said that he says that you have to have that liberal and you have to have that conservative. He is Hegelian. That's how he determines what the truth is, guys. That's how he determines what the truth is. He does not believe. I do not see him putting a stake in the ground for objective truth. He is a relativist in that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
There are going to be a lot of people. I spoke about this in Slack a little bit at Online Great Books. Wrote, whatever. What do you do in Slack? Opine, whatever.
Slake.
And I had a bunch of people push back on me. They're like, "Oh, he believes in objective truth," and then they're projecting on it. He's not what we've been told he is. He's not. Read his words. Don't just read the words. Don't think about anything anybody said about it. Just read it.
All right. The thing is, so you listen to Polonius' speech, which is shallow, and everybody thinks it's more than it is. And so what it's doing is filling in gaps of perhaps what you've been told. I think probably part of the reason for the popularity of J.B. Peterson is honestly a lot of these people haven't had a father figure tell them, change the oil.
Right.
And so all of these rules, which are sensible rules that should have been part of anyone's normal upbringing, they get elevated into something more than they are because nobody else is getting them. But, they're generally not bad. They're
right.
Generally not bad rules. They're just not well-grounded. They're planted in sand, in my thinking.
Right. You need to be well-grounded. So you said a lot of these people haven't had the grandparent or the father figure or whatever. I was talking to a friend about just that very thing this morning. I said, I think a lot of people weren't parented particularly of my generation. I'm Generation X, and everybody's parents got divorced in my generation. Almost, my parents didn't, but most people's parents were divorced, and if they weren't divorced, they were almost always going to be latchkey kids. They'd come home from school and unlock the door and let themselves in and sit in front of the television and watch the after-school special. But if you're parented, your dad says, no. And it keeps you from burning your hand on the stove or stepping off the curb and getting run over. And then as you get a little older, if you're being parented, you find out the reasons for all of those things. And the world starts to make sense.
Yeah.
Well, he's essentially saying no, but it doesn't make any sense. Like, we can't do anything with this other than just, yelling at no to the kids so they don't step off the curb in front of the bus, lets them live one more day. But you can't build a society on it.
So Aristotle says somewhere that you have to have, in order to do ethics, you have to have good habits.
Right.
Because otherwise you can't even start to think about the bigger questions. If you don't have the habits of virtue, then you don't think anything about virtue. You think it's all ridiculous to you. You have to have the habits first, but the habits aren't enough. Ethics is not simply habits. You have to figure out what a human being is and what the highest good is for a human being. And Peterson even talks about this, that he talks in this sort of language that you need to do one thing really well. You need to strive for a goal really hard. But which goal, Dr. Peterson? That's where, for me, it lacks. To the degree that these 24 rules give people some help in decent habits of life, I think that's very, very good.
But is it actually going to do that?
I'm not as down on him as you are. I think, because I've met a bunch of people that they start with Jordan Peterson, and I just was watching some young lady's show somewhere on the internet, and she was really impressive, and she's a Jordan Peterson fan. Starts with him, but you can't stop with him.
Right.
Okay? So it's all right. Start with him. I am particularly bothered by his use of the Bible.
I am too. He's a pagan. Go read Maps of Meaning, by the way.
Well, he is.
Go look at pictures of his house. No, I'm serious. He's a pagan.
I'm not doubting it. He uses the Bible in a psychological way. Okay? The stories are used to illustrate what he takes to be, the highest truths, which are, so Adam and Eve discover that they are naked and ashamed, and what that reveals some psychological status that you need to have fundamental honesty or something like that, which is what I would expect him to do. At least he knows the book. Nobody else knows the book.
He does know the book.
So that's good. I mean, that's something to read. But he talks in one of these chapters about the transcendent. I'm trying to find it. I'm sorry. Kindle is letting me down here.
You're doing fine. I'm sighing because, Jordan Peterson and Bob Dylan, there are these people that seem to have, society has, cast a spell on everyone about these people. I have people telling me about how wonderful of an artist, what beautiful and wonderful art Bob Dylan creates. And I listen to it. I'm just a hillbilly from Catoosa, and the spell wasn't cast on me. Now, Peterson, I did a show on Barbell Logic about his first book, and I was too easy on him. Although that first book is much better than this one. I was too easy on him. I was at a different stage in my life, and I had high hopes for this man. I don't have hopes for hardly anyone in public discourse anymore. We are all on our own. All the spells are broken for me. I knew Dylan stunk from the jump, and now I know that he's not what everybody claims he is. And I often wish I could go back and redo that show that I did on Barbell Logic, because I did not hold him to as high of a standard as I hold everybody else, and I find that somewhat embarrassing. That's probably why I dislike him so much at this point. Actually, I don't dislike him so much, but that's probably why I'm so disenchanted with him so much now, is because of that. And I hope that people look at these people look at these people who have been sort of anointed as spokespeople for certain political movements, what left or right, and see them for who they are instead of the epithets that have been attached to them. Like Ben Shapiro is not a conservative. He's not. He's not. Just because he can, slap down, inarticulate, silly 19-year-old girls about, over the abortion topic, doesn't mean that he is a traditional conservative American person, because he's just not. He's a neocon. His foreign policy is disgusting. And just listen to him. Listen to Peterson. Read their words. See them for what they are. Decode them and to try to figure out what these people's views are. Stop listening to what people tell you they are. Ugh.
Okay. I don't want to talk about Ben Shapiro.
Why not?
In the subheading of Rule 2, which is imagine who you could be, and then I think try very hard to be it. Oh, then aim single-mindedly at that. Okay. He connects it with religion, so I wanted to read a little bit here. So he tells the story of Marduk, who is a Sumerian god, the grandson of Tiamat.
Mm-hmm.
This is Peterson. If and when the gods come to an agreement about their relative positions, more particularly if they arrange themselves into a hierarchy, it means that peace has genuinely been established, because peace is the establishment of a shared hierarchy of divinity of value. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then...
It's a big claim.
Well, what do all the gods share that makes them gods? What is God in essence? That is a very difficult question. See, I perk up, because what is God in essence? I kind of care about that. It is, on the one hand, the question of value. What is of the highest importance? It is, on the other hand, the question of sovereignty. What principles should rule? These are questions posed by those pondering the ultimate source of divine significance itself. I don't think that it is. So it seems like he's got it backwards. To me, he's got it backwards. The question of what God is isn't something established by the culture from whom the stories come. He says that the Mesopotamians brilliantly intuited that the highest God involved careful attention and effective language, and so Marduk looks a certain way. Okay? So that means that the God that Peterson thinks is very important. He talks about God all the time, and the transcendent and the things beyond you. But it's ultimately a creation of the culture. When the culture orders itself, that's when it moves from polytheism to monotheism. And he's got a great story from the Egyptians about Osiris and Set and Horus, and it's told well, and it's kind of entertaining, and there's some insights in there, but it's a bottom-up theology,
mm-hmm.
which I don't think can do the job that he wants it to do if it's a bottom-up theology. Aim at something. Pick the best target you can currently conceptualize. Stumble toward it. Aim for the best. Aim for the highest. Okay, well, there's a difference. If you aim for the highest that comes from the top down from a revelation, or if you aim from the highest as decided by your particular culture. For me, that's a problem.
I think it should be for anyone, not just some trad cath like Karl.
The trads would not have me. I'm not as trad as they are.
Karl's way traddier than they are.
Well, they use Latin. That's newfangled.
If you're one of the new atheists, the neo-new atheists, and you want to rail on religion, is his conception of God, is railing on that going to be getting at the essence of people who are parts of the Christ cult? And the answer is no, it's not.
It might be useful if Richard Dawkins read this with an open heart, which he wouldn't, or Christopher Hitchens if he were still around. What you might get out of it is the utility of God belief.
Mm-hmm.
And you might say, well, therefore, I suppose it ought to be allowed because it makes people's lives better to have a transcendent God upon whom they can rely. He said something nice about fundamentalist Christians somewhere in here. At least their certainty is limited by the fact that they believe in a transcendent God.
Well,
I like that. I thought that was good.
He is a utilitarian in that he tests the truthiness of things by how helpful they are to people.
Yeah.
By his metric, whatever he thinks helpful means. That is definitely one of his core beliefs.
So it might be useful to somebody who'd never ever considered that reasoned religious belief could be anything more than superstition,
mm-hmm.
and snake handling or something. You've never been a snake handler, have you?
No. Well, I had my uncles came out yesterday. We burned this great big old brush pile, and it burned down, and there was a big long bed of coals, and they were all kind of covered with ashes. And I told Uncle Roy, I said, listen, if you really believe, you can just kick those boots off right now and just walk across those ashes. And Uncle Henry said, I believe you're going to burn your damn feet.
Uncle Henry should have responded, "Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God."
Right.
Get behind me, Satan. That would have been the biblical thing to say.
I told him he could walk those coals, and then I would hand him a snake when he got on the other side.
The usefulness of a God concept. See, this is, those of you who are up on your Kierkegaard, this is the judge from either or. Live a well-ordered life, but hasn't quite gotten to the stage of faith. The problem is, I don't think the idea of God does any good unless you really think that it's real. You can't have a God concept, a transcendent concept that you arrive from the bottom up and say, well, yes, our society has coalesced around these rules, and that means we ought to be monotheist, and so we're going to posit a God for the sake of ethics. That God doesn't do the job.
But that's what Peterson does.
It's a golden calf. You made it yourself. It only works if you actually think it's real. He talks about all these mythic stories, and he's got a good vocabulary. He's got a good store of them. They're entertaining to listen to him talk about myth. I could see that. It's fun.
His approach to all of these things is relativist and sort of utilitarian. If monotheistic religion seems to make society stable and safer, then he thinks it's true enough that we should do it, and that's the end for him. And he uses that sort of approach to figure out all of ethics, really. And then he's got this kind of broken Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung approach to reading virtually everything. Everything he reads, he's trying to figure out what it says about somebody's potty training or about the hero's journey or whatever.
Well, and there's literary insights in all of that.
Yeah.
If you're going to write a novel, you need to know your Carl Jung probably to make it, or at least to have absorbed some of it. But, I follow some crazy people on social media who'll come out and say, saw clouds over Etna. Typhon is stirring. This I believe. Well, they have to really believe it, or the mythic vocabulary doesn't do any good for them. You can't say the ancient Greek personification of all that is horrible is stirring, and therefore Etna is rumbling. It doesn't work that way. You have to actually believe that there is this horrible beast buried under the mountain, and that I don't know that you can do the trick where you think this is a social construct and yet I'm going to give it determinative power in my life. You can't say the Christ story is a result of, it's the rebirth story, it's and then believe that Jesus died for your sins. Actually, you can't do both of those. It's either a myth or it's true. And if it's a myth, then what happens is that you're in control of the myth, whether you believe it or not, and then how can it serve as a guide to your life? Except maybe it wouldn't be too much of a guide. It'd be, I choose to live by this roadmap, but I don't have to. And I can change the map whenever I want. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. There are church men's groups all over the country reading this book together right now and just licking all over him and loving all over him. And he's undermining your church's message.
I wouldn't do it in a church. My wife has some mom friends that their book group, she doesn't join it, but they're reading this book. Catholic moms group.
If your church group is reading it and you guys are just deucing on it 24/7, that's good. That'll be fine.
But if you're a church group and you want a book to read,
go read Thomas.
Yeah. read one of your genuine allies, not, somebody who at least doesn't hate you. Jordan Peterson doesn't hate you for being a believer. So I guess there's that, but there's better people you could read.
Yep.
I think.
So I read chapter 2, and he just goes on this thing about Tiamat. I'm like, ugh. By the way, if I ever start raising like rodeo bulls, bucking bulls, I'm going to name one Tiamat. You do 8 seconds. Listen, man. You do 8 seconds on Tiamat.
No, it's supposed to be a cow.
Right.
Tiamat needs to be a cow. It needs to be your prize heifer.
No. It's evil. Powerful. Did 8 seconds on Tiamat. I don't know. But he goes on about this, about Tiamat, and then somehow at the end of the story, it's imagine who you could be and then aim single-mindedly at that. It's just incoherent. I'm like, what are you doing, Jordan? Where's your editor? Did the rehab take? Like, what's going on? I don't recall the first book being like that.
Well, the Tiamat thing is you're supposed to be the Marduk in this story.
What? I get it, whatever. But, there's nothing in here. Again, this is not conservative or right-wing at all. Imagine who you could be and then aim single-mindedly at that. This could be very much about how society is very constraining, that there are a certain number of socially and politically acceptable outcomes for hard-charging young people today. You're going to be under a lot of pressure to go to college, get a job, fight to keep it, sit in the cubicle, get a mortgage, but maybe that's not what you want to do. Imagine who you could be, not what the guidance counselor at PS 165 says you should be. Imagine what you could be and then aim single. It could be something like that. It could be examples of how we are told what we are or what we can be, and how constraining that is, and how narrow it is, and how historically these things, it wasn't like this, and that this is modernity is telling us these blah 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 blah. Like, I could extemporaneously do better than this book, and he doesn't do that. He goes and tells us some bullshit story about Marduk and Tiamat, and then at the end he's like, work hard on being like, what are you talking about? What is this? Tell me I'm wrong. Like, what is it? What is he talking about?
The use of myth in Jordan Peterson. Well, there's your master's thesis, dear listener.
Abuse of myth. I have read books that were written by people whose IQ was a standard deviation or two above mine and were inaccessible to me, incomprehensible to me. I am familiar what incomprehensible looks like when I'm not up to it. That is not this.
All right, so let me pull out a few more quotes.
Poor Karl. He's just trying to be so kind.
He's giving advice about, this is rule 4. Notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. I think that's probably pretty good advice, actually. But it's general Polonius advice. If you're at your job and you notice things are not getting done, do them. And then you'll become a valuable employee. That's great. And then, let's see. Here are 10 things that were crying out to be done, each of them vital, and I am now doing all of them. This is you speaking, you the reader. If you help me out a bit, I will continue. I might even improve, and everything, including your life, will improve along with me. Okay, so I have in my note, improve, ? Okay, so this is a little further on. Let's see, that is responsibility. Constrain evil, reduce suffering. Okay, so for me, my philosophical ears perk up here and I say, what does improve mean? Okay, so what am I supposed to be? Earlier he had said that what should I do is just another way of saying, how will I survive? And I completely disagree with that. I don't care about surviving much. I care about doing the right thing for my family. Mm-hmm. And if it involves me not surviving, well, okay. So I've got a vision of what I think is the good that should help me figure out what to do. And in practice, it's hard, and we all have vices. I know it's tricky, but at least I know I've got an idea of what I think the good life is. It's not mere survival. And if it were mere survival, then saying that your life will improve doesn't make any sense, because you can't be more alive than you are. If you're surviving, I guess we did the job.
The H.G. Wells book we read not too long ago he justified his belief that enormous injustices, in my opinion, should be done to people so that mankind can survive. Like, he was worried about the eradication of the human race because of war, and was willing to do enormous, in my opinion, evil to people just to ensure their survival. I'm not on board with that. And I think that Peterson would probably agree with that. Sorry.
Well, I don't know. You'd have to confront him and say, so when he says constrain evil, reduce suffering.
Peterson edited a report for the panel on sustainable development at the UN It's called A New Global Partnership, Eradicate Poverty and Transform Economies Through Sustainable Development, that eventually got massaged around and manipulated around and became a big chunk of Agenda 21. Like he is an H.G. Wells style New World Order globalist. There you go.
Well, let me read this and you see if it follows from that. So it's talking about the challenges you ought to seek. Of course, this is put in terms of Osiris and Horus, ancient Egyptian gods, because he's Jordan Peterson. Does it serve those you love and perhaps even bring some good to your enemies? That is responsibility. Constrain evil, reduce suffering, confront the possibility that manifests in front of you every second of your life with the desire to make things better. Regardless of the burden you bear, regardless of life's often apparently arbitrary unfairness and cruelty. All other approaches merely deepen the pit, increase its heat, and doom those who inhabit it to continual worsening of their already serious problems. Everybody knows it. Everyone's conscience proclaims it. Everyone's true friend or loved one observes it and despairs when they see someone for whom they care failing to do what needs to be done. Okay, on the surface, that sounds very good. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess on the surface, it's okay, but let's scratch a little bit deeper. What does the word evil mean?
Right. How does he identify evil? Like if he saw evil, how would he pin the tail on it?
Is suffering the same thing as evil? Because he puts them right next to each other. My note is, are these synonyms? Is suffering evil? It's a huge question. Or it's a momentous question. If you think they are, then I guess we just reduce suffering and give people, nice quiet deaths with morphine or
well, it's Brave New World. Eat your soma.
Terminal sedation in the hospitals. You know what that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if suffering is not evil, then we have a completely different outlook on life.
And then how do you measure? How does he identify evil? And then how does he measure suffering? Will you make people suffer by having them avoid suffering?
Yeah, and everyone knows that everyone's conscience proclaims it. No, I don't think everyone knows it because we don't even know what suffering is and whether what we call suffering is actually bad. Is it actually evil? I'm going to go lift later today. I'm going to put myself through some suffering because it's deadlift day and I hate the deadlift. Is that evil? Am I going to do evil to myself? You should put me out of my misery.
That's the ultimate evil, deadlifting. Were Washington and his troops suffering at Valley Forge? Like they were cold, people froze to death. Is a hardship necessarily suffering, right? Like there's no question that there was hardship there. But what exactly is suffering? Maybe it was suffering. I don't know. What is Petersonian suffering? I don't know what it is.
Well, and I think when push comes to shove, if he's dealing with patients, he's not likely to give them the advice to go and end all their suffering. If he does tell people to do hard things, so it can't be that he actually thinks that evil and suffering are the same thing. But if he doesn't think so, he should be more clear and give us a bigger theory of what evil is. As far as I can tell, it's disorder. That's why I called him lawful neutral. Yeah. We need the liberal to get us our new ideas, and we need the conservative to make sure they're not too crazy. But what if both of them are going wrong? And how would you know they were going wrong? At least they'd be orderly. You're in the airplane and it's going down. Well, let's keep everybody in their seats nice and quiet.
Right.
So we're orderly. We have bigger problems than that.
You see like these active shooter drills, and they make everybody like hunker down and like hide. I don't think I would do that. I remember when they had that, but keep them calm, like have them hide in the closet, whatever. I remember when the Columbine thing happened. I hadn't been out of high school very long, and I remember thinking that would just never have happened in where I was from. Like a couple of kids would have got killed, but some redneck would have just stabbed him down with a Husky pencil or something. It just wouldn't have happened. The cowering and the sort of I don't know. Mm-hmm. Peterson is his worldview is formed by his aversion for suffering to a large degree. Like if you read Maps of Meaning, I haven't read it all, but I've thumbed through it and spent a little bit of time with it. And suffering and the fear of suffering and anxiety has shaped the way this guy sees the world to a large, large degree.
It's probably an occupational hazard.
Yeah.
If you have his job.
It might drive a guy to use drugs. I just don't view suffering in the same way he does. And I don't think suffering is a good, by the way, for you wing nuts that are out there listening to this, taking exception with what I'm saying. I don't think it's good, but it's not the measure of how bad something is necessarily. Karl, is it okay if somebody says a good thing for the wrong reasons?
Yes, if you listen to it with care. There's a line in T.S. Eliot's play about Becket being murdered at the cathedral. Something about the greatest treason to do the right thing for the wrong reason. It's Becket. It's a very modern Becket in that play, and he's wondering, am I just doing this for my own glorification, or is this for God? He's worried that he might just be screwing around. You could say true things. The danger is, okay, let's go back to Socrates. He has an image, a poetic image, which might help on this. Okay? It's talking about the difference between true opinion and knowledge. Knowledge, you know the reasons. I don't know how many things we have knowledge of. Socrates was pretty agnostic and pretty careful about claiming knowledge. True opinion means you have an opinion and it's right. Like he says later on, it's a quote that I really like of his, I do not believe you should pursue happiness. If you do so, you'll run into the iteration problem because happy is a right now thing. That's true. I think that's true. I think I know better the reason than he does for why it's true. I think it's because happiness isn't a feeling. And if you aim at the feeling, you're going wrong. But so he says something true. But what it's like, Socrates says it's like the statues of Daedalus. Daedalus was an inventor. He's the guy that his son Icarus took the wings and flew too high and then drowned. But he made these statues that were so lifelike that you had to put chains on them. So if you got one of Daedalus's statues, you had to chain it up in your yard. Like if you got a garden gnome from Daedalus, chain it up or it's going to start walking around. And Socrates says that's what true opinion is like. You don't know the reasons for it, and so it's very quickly going to shift, or it's likely to shift. So the very many nice and correct things that Jordan Peterson says, I don't think the philosophy underneath it is consistent, which means they're in danger of floating away or flying away or walking away.
Yeah.
And then you got to go get all your garden gnomes back with a pitchfork.
My problem with people who say the right things for the wrong reasons is, and listen, I'm guilty of it. I know I am, but nobody anointed me the most influential public intellectual in the Western world right now. So we got to be careful when that happens. If they say the right thing for the wrong reason, my biggest problem with that is they don't stop talking. And if they don't have the right reason behind the first thing they said, or one of those things they said that was correct, stuff to follow is sure to go off the rails.
I was just thinking, if somebody anointed me the greatest public intellectual, I think I'd quit writing.
Right. That's it. Thank you for coming.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's so afraid of screwing up. He talks a little bit about public speaking in here, and how you know that you're going well is when the crowd that's listening to you is absolutely silent. I know a little bit what that's like. I haven't done Jordan Peterson speeches, but been in front of people.
I can't hear our audience. We must be doing well right now.
Well, it's a podcast. We don't have crowds.
Oh,
sorry. But you notice everyone's listening. I remember the first time I started teaching, it was very nerve-wracking for me because I started talking and their pencils started moving. They were paying attention. They were writing down what I said.
Yeah.
Now, later on in my 20-year career, nobody took notes anymore, so that problem went away. Something happened in those 20 years. People wouldn't take notes. When you know that people are paying that much attention, especially if they're paying that much attention to you as kind of a guru or a leader of a movement, I wouldn't want to do it.
Yep.
I think he's uncomfortable with it. It's paying his bills, of course, but dangerous.
Yep.
People, this is why Plato didn't tell you what he really thought. Okay, all you people, I know who you are, because you tell me, who hate Socrates, are frustrated, and just want him to tell you what to think, or at least what Socrates thinks. No, absolutely not. Because what happens then, you just become a vessel for Petersonisms. Some of them will be good, but you're believing it because Peterson said it, not because you've worked out whether it's actually true. It's not yours, So go back, read your Plato. You'll get all of this. All of the best of Peterson is in Plato. Go back and read your Plato, struggle through it, try to figure out what virtue is, try to figure out what the good life is. He's not going to tell you. Plato respects you too much to tell you.
Poor Peterson. Our culture is so starved for people that just say in public unabashedly to clean your room that when they saw it, and me included, I was just enamored with it. Like, finally.
It's good advice.
Yeah, somebody that's not just saying, let your freak flag fly and who cares what your room looks like and piss your parents off. Like, finally. It's a shame that one of the heroes is going to ends up being so weak, but we've got so little to choose from. Rule 5, do not do what you hate. I try not to do what I hate, and I try not to say things I don't think are true. Like, I hate sarcasm. My daughters used to, when they were younger, maybe big sister would knock little sister's book in the floor or something like that. And little sister would say, thanks a lot. I was like, never thank anybody for doing something like that. Sarcasm's not okay. Don't say things you hate. Don't do things you hate. I think that our thoughts follow our words. Our words follow our thoughts too. But if we say things often enough, they affect the way that we think about things. And I want to make sure that the things my daughters say align with reality and their values. Sarcasm is disgusting. I hate it for that reason. And of course, I think that more people need to not do what they hate in terms of their work. It would be much more difficult for corporations to be evil if people would quit helping them. Or the government. Just doing my job, man. Like Cool Hand Luke, my very favorite movie. Sorry, Luke, just doing my job. Luke says, "Con your job, don't make it right, boss." We need more people to not do what they hate.
Yeah. I want to go backwards a little bit. This is the stuff where I get bothered amongst the general pile of good advice. So this is right after he gives it the thing on happiness. I think he's right about that. Okay, so if you think, are you going to do your actions to seek happiness? Well, what do we mean by happiness? If you think happiness is a positive emotion, you're going to screw up because you're going to go for the right now feeling and you're going to screw up your future prospects. So I want to be happy right now. I'm going to stop at the dispensaries on the way home and get a whole lot of cannabis, and because the signs tell me that it's making your life better. All along the highways in Illinois, they're really pushing it. Which you can't advertise cigarettes like that. But let's say I believe them. So I believe the ads, which tell me cannabis is essential and that I need to use it. And so I'm pursuing my happiness right now. And I go home and I smoke it. I wouldn't even know how to do it. You get it in a little pellet. I don't even know what you do with it. I've never done it. I don't know how they dispense it. I hope I will never find out. And now I am in is it THC? Induced haze. And I spend the week like that. And I'm happy for that week. Well, what is the problem? Well, I didn't show up for work.
But it alleviated suffering. So
I neglected the podcast. You said it's time to podcast. And I said, dude, podcast. Bro. Awesome. And so my future prospects get worse. Although my present happiness went up. So it is true. It's absolutely true that seeking happiness is probably a mistake. So you ought to do good things, and then maybe happiness will come along for the ride. That's even if you're thinking happiness is an emotion, which I don't think it is. Thomas makes the point, happiness is a verb. Happiness is activity. Aristotle suddenly makes sense once you know that. But he says in the paragraph after that, what might serve as a more sophisticated alternative to happiness? Imagine it is living in accordance with the sense of responsibility, because that sets things right in the future. Imagine as well that you must act, now we get some adverbs, reliably, honestly, nobly, and in relationship to a higher good in order to manifest a sense of responsibility properly. The higher good would be the simultaneous optimization of your function and the function of the people around you across time, as we've discussed previously. That is the highest good. Wait, hold on. So this is where you ought to throw the book across the room, even if you're a fan of his. Even amongst the very many fine things he says, where he says, the highest good is the optimization of your function and the function of the people around you. What is your function?
Well, read Agenda 21 and you'll find out what he thinks it is.
I have not read Agenda 21.
We should read that for the book, for this. Oh my God.
That's a big question. What is your function? That would be book 1 of Nick and McKeon Ethics, and either 9 or 10 of Nick and McKeon Ethics, which will give you an answer to that. Or, what is it? First part of the second part of the Summa will give you some answers to that. Or Nietzsche will give you some answers to that, a little bit different. But that's the big question. But using optimization, using economic language about the highest good, I'm freaked out by that.
But listen, man, this is your conservative champion, because, you know, he wrecked that chick on the BBC interview. Please be cautious, everybody. Please, would you please?
Feelings don't care about your facts.
Oh, you didn't want to talk about that guy. Hey. Abandon ideology. I have a problem with that. You know, if you've got the proper ideology, you should be willing to suffer for it.
Right, but for him, ideology is it's not about truth. It's about your approach to the fundamental problems of survival.
He doesn't want you to have closely held opinions. He just doesn't. He wants you to keep your head on a swivel and always be looking for the thing that provides the most utility according to his measure.
Yeah, so I would be more comfortable if he didn't use the Bible language. Because I know why he's doing it. He's always using myth, like stories of Abraham and Jesus and everything, to make psychological points, which is why it gets read in church groups.
Right.
But it's not Christian. It just isn't. It's okay not to be Christian.
Yeah.
He's not your friend. He's somebody using your stories. It'd be like, you know, I have a book of Native American stories about coyote and everything. I have a book of that. It'd be like me reading those stories and using them to make psychological talking points.
Charity would be mad that you even had the book.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have it.
Yeah.
Are they not supposed to be? Did it violate something to write them down?
If you write them down, they die. Because you don't have to, because nobody has
all right,
to
well, there we go. That's kind of making the point. I'm taking the stories out of their proper context, out of their culture, and using them for other ends.
Right.
And so if you're part of that culture, you might be happy. Oh, he knows the story. Oh, yeah, he knows those coyote stories. All right. But on the other hand, I'm not using them for the right reason. I'm not using them in the right way. You know, so if Jordan Peterson talks about Jesus on the cross saying, my God, why have you forsaken me?" to talk about psychological feelings of abandonment, he's not doing the same thing we do in Holy Week with that story. So he's using your stories, but he's using them for his purposes. And just because he says Jesus words doesn't mean he's one of you. Does that make sense?
Or Marduk and Tiamat words.
Yeah, the ancient Sumerians are upset. They filed a protest.
Abandon ideology.
Yeah, there's a paragraph in here I want to read. I thought it was pretty good. Some self-knowledge from him. When he finds his audiences that are hanging on every word, he says, "It's not at all easy to know what to think about finding myself with an audience like that. What is going on? Any sensible person would be taken aback, to put it mildly, by all of this. It seems that my work must be addressing something that is missing in many people's lives. Now, as I mentioned previously, I am relying for much of my content on the ideas of great psychologists and other thinkers, and that should count for something. But these people come up to him and they say, like this guy comes up and says, I was homeless and broke and I listened to your lectures and now I'm married and I have a daughter and I have my own apartment. Thank you, Dr. Peterson." And we know this happens. So this is not like this guy is doing complete evil. He's doing a lot of good for a lot of people. And he says at the end of that next paragraph, "I find it heart-wrenching to see how little encouragement and guidance so many people have received, and how much good can emerge when just a little more is provided." When we meet one-on-one, people also tell me that they enjoy my lectures and what I've written because what I say and write provides them with the words they need to express things they already know but are unable to articulate. I think that's probably true, but it shouldn't be true. He's saying a whole lot of things that people ought to just know, that they ought to have learned from their grandpa, either from watching him or from him telling them, and they don't have it. And so the little bit that he does has a huge impact. You're making faces. It's good.
No, you're right.
It's good. But, he's not the Messiah is what I'm saying. He's just a guy writing general good advice coming from a standpoint of secular psychology and mythological reflection. It's a shallow pond, but it's a good pond.
It's murky. It's confusing. It's not even a good book or an okay. I mean, I've read a lot of, New York Times bestseller books. I've read so many of these kind of pop
50 Shades of Grey
book. Yeah, exactly. Twilight. No, I was thinking of stuff like Blink or the Freakonomics stuff, the Gladwell, all that kind of S. And I won't read that stuff anymore because I just, like I said, I'm not going to live long enough. And this isn't as good as that. It's just like he just tells some stories and he puts some conjunctions between the stories. And at the end of the chapter, he puts the tag on there about, being true to yourself or clean, whatever. It's not very good. Doggone it.
I think he misunderstands Nietzsche.
Good. Yeah. He deuces on Nietzsche in his chapter about ideology, if I remember correctly.
The Übermensch.
Right.
It is not at all obvious that the individual will ever be capable of bringing the new values that Nietzsche so fervently longed for into being. Yeah, it's not supposed to be everybody. Jordan. There wouldn't be a society of Übermenschen.
No.
There'd be one. Maybe. So I don't think... He also confuses the Immaculate Conception with the Assumption. When he's talking about paintings. That's a Catholic nerd thing. Everybody does that.
He gets Foucault right. He says that, there are Marxists that weren't concerned with economics, but were completely concerned with power only. He deuces on ressentiment. So he does things like that, and which make people on, I'm going to say our side, think that they found a friend here, and maybe he's not an enemy, but he's not, and maybe he is a friend. But just because he says a few things right doesn't mean he's going to say all the things right. The blind hog finds an acorn every now and then, too.
I think you're better off reading Plato and Aristotle.
Of course. There's
better stuff. But if you need someone to tell you to clean your room, I don't know, probably just read the rules, but not all of the commentary on the rules.
Now here's something, though. Does anybody actually need to be told that?
Yes, they do. They need to be told that by somebody whom they respect. I'm sorry that's true, but they do.
Inexplicable.
Look.
Buy Alpha Brain. To support the show, you should go and buy, I don't know what the hell is going on anymore, Carl.
It is a culture that in many ways has many of the things that made it endure have collapsed. Things that should have been done by family are not done at all. There's a whole bunch of people that need advice from an authority figure, one that they can respect. What does he say? When jobs are not being done, that this is an opportunity.
That's true. I had a lady that worked for me one time back when I had a real business. She came in my office one day with a spiral notebook, and she said, I've seen a number of things that I think could be better and that aren't being done. And I said, oh, pray tell. And she read to me out of that notebook. I said, okay, you're the charge now. And she went from being a clerk to having 12 direct reports. And she did a real good job for me until she didn't. Yeah. So, he says some of the right things. I said in Slack to the people who thought I was reading him wrong. And I'm not. The spell was cast on me for a moment, but I broke it. But he is a personal responsibility progressive. He's a 1934 American progressive. He's not a victim politics progressive from 2021. He's a different kind of progressive. And if I have to pick, then the personal responsibility progressive is my favorite. That's my favorite. Is our enemy's enemy our friend?
I don't know. If there's a big job, any help you can get is worth getting. I want to go back to where I think there are some difficulties here. So after talking about Nietzsche and Dostoevsky, both, I think, dealing with the same problem, coming with different solutions, the collapse of values in the 19th century, this is when it really started, or really got going. It is also by no means self-evident that value, subjective though it appears to be, is not an integral part of reality, despite the undeniable utility of the scientific method. The central scientific axiom left to us by the Enlightenment, that reality is the exclusive domain of the objective, poses a fatal challenge to the reality of religious experience if the latter experience is fundamentally subjective, and it appears to be exactly that. But there is something complicating the situation that seems to lie between the subjective and the objective. What if there are experiences that typically manifest themselves to one person at a time, but appear to form a meaningful pattern when considered collectively? This indicates something is occurring that is not merely subjective, though it cannot be easily pinned down with the existing methods of science. I'm going to skip to the end. This does not mean, however, that value is not real. It means only that it is so complex that it cannot yet and may never fit itself with the scientific worldview. All right, so religious values, are they subjective or not? The Enlightenment tells us that they're fundamentally subjective, but he says, well, but there's a pattern when considered collectively, so maybe they're not merely subjective. Maybe there's a grand pattern. I don't think it does the job if you don't believe that it's actually real.
Well, see, he just needs you to think it's real, and then he can live in an ordered society. See, this book is for you. It's not for him, dude.
Mm-hmm. Somebody needs to believe in objective values, but he's not giving a great reason why they're real. They seem real to you in your psyche, and it seems like lots of people have the similar experiences, so they seem to be more than merely subjective. But it's real with an asterisk. This is not him saying it.
Well, Karl, your subjective experience is real for you.
Well.
And that's undeniable.
The fact that religious ideas are capable of uniting vast numbers of people under a single moral umbrella indicates something universal calling from within. Wait, calling from within? Okay, but if it's calling from within, then it's societal and it's not good. I don't know that it's good enough to do the job that we need it to do. Kant says something about this. He can't prove the existence of God, he doesn't think. But he says that you need to posit a God for the sake of morality. You can't have universal moral law without a lawgiver. Well, that's probably true, but your posited God's not going to do the job. You can't make one. You make the golden calf, it's not going to do anything. It can't be the ground of your culture, your golden calf. Even if you all decide, well, we're fervently going to believe in this thing. It's not going to do the job you want it to do. You need Moses going up the mountain and coming down with something. Or it's no good.
Yeah, I don't know.
TLDR.
Oh, jeez. So I've been reading this Pentti Linkola. I've been reading this Chinese book on warfare, all kinds of weird stuff. The Hive and the Honeybee, about beekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
Peterson's over there trying to pollute me with all of his utilitarian progressive garbage. I can't even right now, like the kids say.
How's this for a sentence for you? When you read this in your church group, enjoy, okay? Like God, however, ideology is dead. The bloody excesses of the 20th century killed it. We should let it go and begin to address and consider smaller, more precisely defined problems. Okay, but back up. Wait a minute. Like God, however, ideology is dead? This is your Catholic mom group book?
And it's cruddy reading of Nietzsche again.
It's not that great. It's not that terrible, though.
No, it's not. But I keep telling... He's controlled op, and he's been anointed, and it bothers me.
If he were not anointed, what would your reaction be? If this was just a book that we found?
Well, there's a lot of books that I find that aren't that very good, but there's not, like, the New York Times doesn't tell me it's written by the most influential public intellectual in the Western world right now. If I write a book, it's not going to be very good either, but the New York Times and the Washington Post and a bunch of people aren't going to, the BBC is not going to have me on. Like, nobody's going to act like it's something it isn't. And then if you read my book and you say publicly that it's not that great, nobody's going to shout you down and say you misread it. It's just because it's not going to be very good.
Yeah. Let me read some more because I did read the whole thing. Dear listener, I read the whole damn book.
Carl said before we turned the mics on, I was like, why did you read it? And he's like, well, that's my job. And I was like, well, it's not my job. My job on this show is entirely different than that.
I was acting in a responsible Jordan Petersonian manner. And I was doing my task. But he has one of his rules is about beauty. You should make your room beautiful. You should make one room in your house very beautiful. Okay, that's not terrible. This is, I think, Rule 8. Try to make one room in your home as beautiful as possible. And he says here, in the memory and vision, in the cleaning room is not enough chapter. As it is said, he's going to use the Bible, man shall not live by bread alone. That is exactly right. Actually, the Bible tells you what you should live by every word that comes from God. But he has a different interpretation of that, church groups. You should know this. He doesn't complete the quote. That is exactly right. We live by beauty. We live by literature. We live by art. We cannot live without some connection to the divine, and beauty is divine because in its absence life is too short, too dismal, and too tragic, and we must be sharp and awake and prepared so that we can survive properly and orient the world properly and not destroy things, including ourselves, and beauty can help us appreciate the wonder of being and motivate us to seek gratitude when we might otherwise be prone to destructive resentment. Okay,
where's the editor? What?
Yes, but beauty is divine, but wait a minute. Isn't monotheism a projection of a society that's finally established the use of order and therefore become monotheist? In what way is that actually divine? I need my divine to be divine. It can't just mean really cool. In other words, God as conceived by Jordan Peterson doesn't do the job that he needs God to do. In a generally good statement about beauty being important.
What page was that on?
203.
No.
Location 2848.
Oh, boy. In that big long sentence, beauty is divine because in its absence, life is too short, too dismal, and too tragic. That's the definition of divinity for him. Like, it's that which makes life longer, less dismal, and less tragic. That's it. He talks about it all the time. He's all concerned about suffering, and that's divinity. There you go. If it reduces suffering and makes things more beautiful, then it's divine. That's it.
Yep. Well, that's why he had to excise the end of Matthew 4:4. Man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. No, he does. You see, the Bible doesn't say you live by beauty. At least not there. You can make a biblical case for beauty for sure, but that's not here. And it's just a mangle of a quote.
Here was an opportunity for him to put forth even a weak theory of aesthetics and tie metaphysics and ethics and politics and aesthetics together and describe how people, like we read the Crazy Mishima book, right? He believes that if the aesthetics are right, the action will be right. And he makes a pretty good argument for it, I think. Whether you agree or not, he at least made a run at it. This isn't here. Like, he had an opportunity to do it, and he didn't get it done. And so for the wiener right now who's like, oh, Scott, you haven't written a book. No, I haven't written a book because I'm not a writer, but I tell you what I have done, thousands of hours of podcast for you. So I do try to create, and I do try to put forth a coherent worldview. I'm wrong sometimes, and I do retractions, and that's fine. I was wrong when I was too soft on the first book review. I did that, but whatever.
I think you need a, what do they call those things in the fancy French restaurants that cleanse your palate?
An aperitif?
Yeah.
I don't know. A cucumber sandwich?
Yep. That's what you need.
It's all right. It's only in hardback right now, and it was kind of expensive. It wasn't a good value because of that. It's just not that good of a book. I was thinking about that William Bennett book that came out in the, I don't know, late 80s, early 90s, the Book of Virtues,
Mm-hmm.
He has a little bit of a commentary. It's been a long time since I even looked at it, but it's got a little bit of a commentary followed by a famous story. Maybe I don't remember what they were. I don't know. Maybe something about, I don't know, John Henry, the steel driving man, or whatever. Little stories tell us something about a virtue. There was a time in the Republican and conservative movement where they were all talking about virtues as values, where they were like kind of equating them with the economic. If you go look at that Bennett book, and I think the Bennett book is similar to this. They're not hardcore philosophy or anything like that. It's you might want to read that instead of Twilight. It's not a heavy lift, but maybe you want to go read it. But at that time, Bennett, I think he was the Secretary of Education. He had been part of several Republican administrations. He was kind of in front of that whole talk about family values, traditional values, and virtue. But they couldn't tell you what any of that stuff meant or where it came from or why it was important. So Bennett was saying a lot of the things that maybe a lot of people would like to hear, things about thrift and hard work and humility and all that. But why? And then if that, then what? Like none of that was in there. And I think that's why they ultimately have shit the political bed. Well, Peterson is saying a lot of those same sorts of things, but he doesn't have his whys or his then whats at all. It's just not there.
Right. If it's just values, so family values, all of that stuff, it kind of gets made fun of. And I think rightly so. And not because I disagree with any of the particular virtues in the book. We have that book.
Yeah.
Some nice stories about different ways to be good. It's like the stories from the Republic. You're supposed to tell the kids the right kind of stories. So this is a collection of the right kind of stories.
You bet.
But if they're values, I value vanilla ice cream over chocolate. That's a value. It's a matter of taste. I could change it if I liked. I could decide that I'm going to go with Rocky Road or one of those green ice cream flavors.
This green ice cream flavors.
I don't know. I only ever get vanilla, so I don't ever know what the other ones are. Because I've found the perfect ice cream. Why would I change?
I agree with that.
But values, like the only reason that you stay married to your wife and raise your children is because you value it. In other words, you came up with it. It's the same bottom-up thing that Peterson has when he talks about God. Is it a value because I decide it? Are things, or as Socrates says to Euthyphro, are things pious because do the gods love them because they're pious, or are they pious because the gods love them? Is marriage something to value just because you value it? Or is it something to value because there's something to marriage itself, a reality in marriage itself that calls from you the valuing of it? That's a convoluted sentence, but what I mean is family values is kind of doomed to fail. It's not, conservatism is kind of doomed to fail because it just means go slow. It doesn't say why you should believe the things that they're trying to go slow about. It's what is the good? The biggest question is, what is the good? Get out of the cave, go see the form of the good. That tells you everything else.
My values.
Values, it's an empty word.
And it implies a sort of calculus that I don't like. Everything has been just suffused with the talk of, with the ways of speaking from economics. But Bennett failed with that. And by the way, but I don't think that William Bennett with that book was trying really anything other than to put some nice stories out for maybe 8 to 12-year-olds to read.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he had any lofty aspiration there, but I think it's a little snapshot in time of what that conversation looked like in public there in, I don't know, 88 or whenever that book came out. And the Peterson book is no more than that Bennett Book of Virtues was, in my opinion, which is an okay thing. It's an okay thing, but the whys aren't there, and the therefores are awry as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about this anymore.
I'm gonna read one last bit, and then we can be done with this. When Peterson does get into politics, he talks about it in psychological terms. It's his job, The only tool you have is a hammer. Everything looks like a nail. He describes conservative and liberal as personality types, not as like actual well-worked-out positions. If you are conservative, you like things to be where they are supposed to be when they are supposed to be there. You're in the place you want to be when people act conventionally, responsibly, and predictably. Conservatives are necessary for maintaining things the way they are, when everything is working and change might be dangerous. Liberals, by contrast, are necessary for changing things when they are no longer working.
How do you know what working is?
Yes, exactly. What does working mean? So you have personality types at the service of some other good, but what's the other good?
I'll tell you this. He has an idea of what that good is, and he wrote a report for the UN that they used to create Agenda 21 based on that. This guy ain't... With friends like this, who needs enemies?
If Jordan Peterson is the beginning of your intellectual development, all right. I don't think you ought to be the end.
Fair enough.
I don't think he even wants you to be the end.
No. Yeah, a lot of people are going to be mad at me about this. Peterson likes our program here. He told me as much. He told the public as much. He has tweeted about us. He has been a supporter of our program, and I thank him for that very much. But just because you like what I do doesn't mean I have to like what you do. Because God knows he ain't going to like everything I do. I said what I believe about it, and if you don't like me for that, then you can just pound sand.
Oh, yeah. You took that Jordan Peterson personality inventory thing. How did you do on agreeableness?
0.
You scored a 0 on agreeableness. I think you are so disagreeable that you made for damn sure that you scored a 0 whenever a question came up.
Highly disagreeable. High industriousness. Low on the agreeability.
It told me I was kind of lazy.
Oh, yeah. I'm high industriousness.
Yeah, but I feel bad about being lazy, so then I do a whole lot of work.
Yeah, I think the Peterson, that sort of personality, whatever the heck he calls that thing, I think that's good. He's got that self-authoring program. Seems to be good. It seems to help people, kind of find their way. I think those things are good. I think that he needs to kind of stay in his lane, which is counseling and the like.
I bet he's pretty good at it.
I suspect that he is. One-on-one, high empathy talk therapy. It's probably pretty good. He's probably helped a number of people a great deal. I would say that he probably needs to be someone who that you go to for triage, like if you're in real bad trouble. But if you're trying to make a pretty decent situation better, he's probably not your guy.
Well, what are we going to read next?
I don't know.
Something short this time.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is 400 and something pages that I slammed through my brain. Every single page.
That's good. You're such a good boy. Good boy. I don't know. I've been reading this Lynn Cola, and he's got a little essay called Humbug, short, kind of fun.
How about Faust?
Oh my,
Goethe.
Isn't Faust? Isn't that the guy that works for the CDC that tells you I have to wear like 3 masks?
No, this is his ancestor. Oh,
okay.
I don't think it's that long. This play, maybe not for next week, but I want to put it on our list. Peterson mentions it, and I thought, yeah, maybe we ought to read some German stuff.
Yeah, we can read Faustus, Dr. Faustus.
The Marlowe thing?
Yeah.
I think Goethe's better.
Oh, maybe we could read them both. Drag race them.
Is this the face that launched 1,000 ships? That would be...
Helen?
That's the Marlowe version. Everyone thinks that's Shakespeare, but it's not.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll figure that out. There's another podcast. Hope we made you mad. Don't read this. Go read something else. Yeah. Yeah, the end.
I don't know. You could have it on in the car if you're driving.
Yeah, but you could have something else on in the car.
You could have something better.
That's the thing. And a lot of people write books that aren't that great, and that's okay too. But the fact that, gosh, they just keep running this down our throat. Holy smash. We'll figure out what we're going to read, and then we'll just spring it on you. It's just going to be a surprise. Meanwhile, you can go to the Music and Ideas show. You Google Music and Ideas podcast. You'll find us. Go to iTunes, look up Music and Ideas, and maybe type in Karl's name. It's kind of hard to find in there. They're burying us, but you can find it. And check out that show. We just did one on pop lyrics. We recorded one recently on Les Paul, which I think turned out pretty well. And next Music and Ideas show is going to be one where the three of us guys, Trent, Karl, and myself, will all bring 3 songs that we're a little ashamed of. And
I'm ashamed of nothing.
That's going to be fun. Then how will you pick?
I don't know. It'll be something that I should be ashamed of if I had a musical conscience.
Have you picked 3 yet?
Oh, I got some ideas.
I've got one for sure. And then the other 2 keep changing.
I think I know what one of them is.
Mine?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's the Martika thing.
No, it's not, but I do love that song. It is a POS. I love it, though. Yeah. No, it's not going to be that. It's not going to be that. I don't love it that much. Yeah. Well, anyway, there is another Online Great Books podcast. If we killed your calf, I'm sorry. No, I'm not. I'm really not. But I hope you guys come back and listen next time, and hopefully we'll cover something that's a better book. Talk to you in a week.
Bye.